Hello and welcome to the C3 Method weekly Q&A for Patreon. Our goal is to educate you on everything health and fitness related with a clear, concise, and customized approach. Our goal is to teach you everything that you need to know in a way that fits you best. Okay, I think I'm getting better and better at this intro. I probably need to start practicing it, but then I start to get worried if I'm saying it right or not. But that's the intent, is just to answer questions for everybody, help you have an idea of what's going on, and that way everybody can live a healthier and happier life. That's the goal. So thank you for joining this week's Q&A. The first thing I actually want to cover this week is actually how to use Patreon. So the Q&A is part of the Patreon service. The idea is that I present myself as being available to answer any questions for the Patreon members. The goal is that you can feel comfortable asking anything that you want to know and then get a personalized answer. So when people submit questions, you can do that on our main kind of feed page. Pinned to the top of the page is a questions post. So you can open that, you can submit your question, that'll be great. Or you can send a direct message on Patreon, and that is totally fine as well. A lot of people actually do that. More people do that than they use the public post. Probably because it's an understandable concern that maybe what you're going to ask is a dumb question, or I must be the only person who worries about this, or I must be the only person who doesn't know this. It's never the case, ever. So feel free to use the questions post to post your questions. You can also use the community page. There's a community page where people can talk back and forth amongst everybody within the Patreon service. And then there is the direct message. That is the way in which most people are using it. But you can use any method to ask questions, and that would be great. Then when you join Patreon, my hope is not only do you have the ability to ask questions, but we also have the nutrition education video, which teaches you how to set up your own nutrition program. You can find out what calories you should be having, protein you should be having, how to distribute your calories and protein throughout the day. And it talks a little bit about whether you should focus on carbs or fats and different types of food sources. But once you have that initial template written, you can then ask questions and learn how to continue to personalize the nutrition program. So that way, when you're following the training programs within the app, you have the nutritional support to perform to your best, to create the best stimulus out of the workouts, and then to have the materials needed to fulfill that stimulus and make the adaptations that you want. So having a solid nutrition approach is going to help you maximize the training programs. You absolutely should have both components. If I'm going to follow a training program, I should have the nutritional support set up for that program. And then the training programs, we have a couple. We have the options of created for you. So those are programs based on the most popular reasons why people want programs. Fat loss, bodybuilding, strength, functional athleticism. And they're brand new every 4 weeks with brand new exercises. So you can follow any one of those programs. You can also make a program request. So the same way you would ask questions, you can also just shoot me a message and say, hey, I'm interested in getting into this type of training. Would you mind creating a program or giving me some tips on training for that? And if it's a structure in which and a goal in which I think other people would benefit, I will absolutely write out extra training programs for people to follow. And I'm actually going to be creating more templates that people can use to create your own workouts as well. Over half of my one-on-one clients are personal trainers, and they like having some structure to know that their training programs are good, but then also having some freedom to select different exercises and try different approaches. So I want to create some more templates so that way people can create their own as well. That's the idea. Is on Patreon you can ask any questions you want. You can get nutrition programming help, and you can get training programs based on whatever your goal and the type of program, whether you want it just written for you and you don't have to do any of the thinking, or if you wanted a template and you can do some thinking, but guided thinking by asking questions. I want to have all of that available. And hopefully then that is creating a service that matches what people need from the service. And that's my full intent for Patreon. Now, also for people who sign up on Patreon and they're personal trainers, you're welcome and encouraged to use the programs I write for your clients. So in a sense, Patreon is giving you free program creation. You can just follow these programs You can ask questions on how to personalize them for individual client needs. If you have individual clients who you think, maybe this is better or maybe this is better, or I'm not sure, ask questions and I'll cover it in the Q&A and I'll send you some direct answers. But that would be another cool feature of Patreon, is if you're a personal trainer, you don't have to write your own programs anymore if you don't want, or you can use those templates, and that'll help you create more structured programming that addresses all the individual components that are needed for that goal and to keep people safe and healthy. So there's a lot of programming education included in the service, along with the Q&As and the nutrition education. So I wanted to cover that, give you an idea of what I think Patreon could do for you and why I'm excited about offering this service. Cool. Okay, so let's get into this week's questions. We have some nutrition questions, training questions, and a mindset question this week, which is fun and exciting. Okay, first question. If I'm at the top of my calorie range, but I haven't had enough protein, what should I do? Should I go over my calorie range in order to reach the protein target? Okay, so for my clients, and you'll notice this when you set up your own nutrition program following our video, is that we typically recommend a range of calories per day. That range can be, adjusted based on somebody's activity level from day to day, but typically there's an allowance for some variation within the day. Some people, it might be a 200 calorie range variance. Maybe their goal is 2,000 to 2,200. Other people, if they're newer to tracking foods and kind of fine-tuning this type of stuff, their range might be bigger. Some clients have a 400 range, maybe a 600 range, maybe even an 800 calorie range, depending on what their history is. But they'll have a range. It's impossible to eat an exact number of calories every single day. So if you were supposed to eat 1867, so 1,867 calories every day, you're not going to do that unless you eat the exact same food every single day, which again, people are not going to do. So they'll be plus or minus a little bit here or there. And then if they go over, they feel like they're a loser and they failed. If they go under, they feel like they're a loser and they failed. And it's just a very emotionally wrecking process when you try to hit an exact number. So I do recommend a range. And then what this person is saying is, okay, I'm already at the top of my range. Let's give an example of 2,000 to 2,400 calories. They're already at like 2,400 calories or 2,380 something. So they're at the top of the range, but they haven't had enough protein yet. So maybe their protein minimum is 120 grams and they're only at 90. And it's like, oh my gosh, if I try to get my protein up, that is going to push me over my calorie limit. What should I do? The answer there that I want to clarify is, this is not fun. Get ready for a little bit of brutal honesty, but we've already screwed up. There's no way to save the day. So our goal would be is to screw up as little as possible. But if I'm already at the top of my calorie range and I'm not even at the minimum of my protein, what that means is I've already overeaten my carbs and fats. Our calorie range accounts for the protein calories that we should have. Let's make the math a little bit easy for me. But let's say you're supposed to have 100 grams of protein. There are 4 calories per gram when it comes to protein on average. So 100 grams of protein would be equivalent to around 400 calories. If our daily total allows for, say, 1,600 calories, we know that 400 of that is supposed to come from protein. If I'm already at 1,600 calories, but I'm not even close to 400 calories being for protein yet, then that means I've eaten more of other calories. The other calories would be carbs and fats. So if I'm already at the top of my calorie range and I haven't eaten a sufficient amount of protein, then I'm over-consumed my carbs and fats. That means that we're not necessarily in a surplus of carbs and fats, and now all of a sudden we're going to gain a bunch of fat. If we set up our calorie range correctly, whether it's for fat loss, maintenance and body composition, athletic performance, and or gaining muscle size, which typically means we're going to gain weight, whatever the reason is that we have our calories set where we have them set, there's a spectrum of what happens within those ranges. When I'm on the lower end of the range, I maybe cause more fat loss if I'm in a deficit. If I'm at around maintenance calories, maybe I have a little bit of a fat loss day, maybe a little bit of a lower performance day. If I'm muscle growth and weight gain and I'm on the low end of the range, I'm just not pushing that progress as much. If I'm on the high end of the ranges, then it's all the opposite of kind of those targets. But if I end up going 50 calories over, it's not an on-off switch. It's not like I had a good day versus a bad day, and now I've achieved none of the progress that I wanted. Everything's a waste. It's a spectrum, and we just know that within the range that we set, we get the best of the middle of the spectrum. So if we think of a bell curve like this, we know the range that we choose is that the peak of the bell, and that's where we want the best progress. That's where we get the best results. If I go a little bit outside of that range, I'm still in parts of the bell, the lower scoops. So I'm still going to get something. I'm still going to get some positive. I just maybe not get as much of a positive. So anytime that I have this happen, what I would say to myself, if this is me in the situation, is, okay, maybe I'm not going to get as much progress today, but I made it through the day. I got something. Let me live and learn. Let me figure out what I messed up. How can I get better, next time that happens? And then I just move on and keep going. Now, when it comes to what to do with calories and protein, what I would do is I would suggest using a protein powder, like a whey isolate. Now, there's a very fair discussion between casein and whey and the rates of digestion and blah, 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 blah. But we're going to skip that, and maybe I'll add that to next week's podcast or weekly Q&A. Well, let's cover it a little bit. Okay, so what I would do is I would use a protein powder. And if I can get an isolate, that means there's very little fats, very little carbs, almost like trace amounts of those, and a whole bunch of protein. So I can use the isolate to get my protein up to the minimum range and have a very minimal effect on calories. Will my calories go up? Yes, because protein contributes to calories, but I'm not really increasing carbs and fats because there's not going to be any carbs and fats in an isolate powder. So I can push my protein into range, make sure I get the benefits of sufficient protein. And then even though the calories go over, I'm not really going over by increasing more carbs and fats, which exacerbates the issue. My excess of carbs and fats is already there, but at least it doesn't get made worse. The last thing I would want to do is, in the pursuit of trying to get to my protein target, eat a food that contains a bunch of carbs and fats with it. So I'm not going to eat a block of cheese to try to get to my protein target because it's going to come with a whole bunch of fats that I don't need. So you want to use something that's pure protein, and that could be a powder. It could be even like chicken breast, making sure that you don't eat the skin and make sure it's chicken breast, not chicken thighs. So there's a ton of other options like tofu and some other odds and ends. You just want to pick a protein source that is minimal carbs and fats, and powders tend to be the cleanest and easiest. Now, when I was talking about whey versus casein, whey protein powder is a fast digesting protein powder. Casein is a slow digesting protein powder. We typically are going to have whey protein on hand because we tend to use whey protein more as a pre-workout, intra-workout, post-workout, a meal addition here or there. We tend to just utilize whey protein and more often. And whey protein tends to taste better than casein. If you've ever had a casein protein powder, it doesn't usually taste as good. So whey is more likely to have on hand. So I have people use whey, and I'll use that myself. Now, does that digest very quickly? And then maybe like protein isn't like, creating protein synthesis for hours on end, blah, blah, blah. Sure, but in the grand scheme of things, that's a small concern, not much of a concern for us. If you do want to cover that concern, though, you can get a casein protein powder, which is a slower digesting protein powder, and just get a small tub of it and use it sparingly in cases like this, where maybe like before bed, if you want to add a bunch of protein to get to your minimum target, it would be typically better to add the casein. If you're going to have protein by itself, the casein is slower digesting and it'll have more of a delayed, prolonged protein synthesis, which is like protein creation, like muscle creation, muscle repair process throughout the night. So that is typically what I would recommend is if somebody's at the top of their calorie range, but they haven't hit their protein yet, what do? Get a pure protein food, get to your minimum, and then move on, but figure out what you did that day to why the calories were so high, but yet protein was low. Make sure you make some adjustments and don't run into that situation again. Cool. Second question, what is the best meal frequency? Ooh, fun. It depends on who you are, what your goals are, and what your history is. The general answer is there isn't a best. I've had clients who eat 1 or 2 meals a day, and that works great for their goals and for their lifestyle. I have other clients who eat 5, 6, 7 times a day, and that's great for their goals and their lifestyle. Meal frequency is, if I'm interpreting what you mean correctly, is how often should I eat throughout the day. And typically, what I think of is eating before I'm active, eating after I'm active, and then eating in like downtimes. If it fits my schedule well and I'm hungry based on the digestion rate of the foods that I had in my other meals and my tolerance for food volume per meal. So, for example, if I want to eat 3,000 calories a day and I only want to have one meal a day, it can be very challenging to eat 3,000 calories in one meal. It's probably going to cause a lot of digestive stress, and it would be really hard to get the sufficient amount of protein that I want in the 3,000 calories. So one meal for 3,000 calories, and say I'm aiming for 240 grams of protein, it's unrealistic that is going to be the best situation. So then you could say to yourself, okay, well, can I do it across 2 meals? That's also really hard. So maybe I need 3 meals at like the lowest number in order to have 1,000 calories per meal, 80 grams of protein per meal, which is actually still kind of hard to eat. So the more calories, the more protein somebody needs in their day, they tend to need more number of meals throughout the day to make the digestibility and comfort and kind of how the meal fits into their lifestyle, make all of that easier by splitting their calories and protein up across multiple meals. Then the lower amount of calories and protein somebody has, they typically can get away with less frequent meals. So maybe they only do 2 or 3 meals a day if their target's 1,500 calories and maybe only 120 grams of protein. Maybe that works great for them. Or maybe they're more into, like, they like the lean proteins and carbs. They have good energy from that. If you favor those foods, they digest really quickly. So you're going to be hungry faster. So you might need to have more meals throughout the day based on the fact that you favor carbs and lean protein. Now, let's say somebody's on the other end of the spectrum. Maybe they like more of a high-fat, high-protein diet. They're not going to be as hungry between their meals because those foods digest slower. So maybe they don't need as many meals because they feel fuller between their meals. So it does come into, like, it factors into what foods you have, how many total calories and grams of protein you need to have in a day. There really isn't a, 3 meals is best, 4 meals is best, 5 meals is best. It depends on the person. It depends on your comfort level with how much volume you have per food, per meal. And then how many meals can you fit into your schedule? If your schedule only allows 3, then you got to work with 3. If your schedule allows unlimited amount and you can have whatever you want, then you base that on comfort level per meal, the food preferences that you have, and then the digestion rates of those food preferences. Okay. That was probably not an answer, but it is an answer kind of thing, like where you were wanting a number and I didn't give you a number. So sorry about that. But I would always rather give the real answer and then let you personalize and decide from there. So for this person, after listening to this answer, if you have any follow-up questions, just shoot me a message and I'll get back to you and we'll help kind of sort that out. Next question. How can I eat out with family and friends but stay on track with my goals? Okay. One of the things I do is I look up nutrition facts before I go to certain restaurants. That's a very nerdy, dorky thing to do, but it is an option. So I will know, okay, this meal on their menu says it's 800 calories, this many grams of protein, so I can have that, or blah, blah, blah. So I'll look up nutrition facts ahead of time. If I don't know the nutrition facts, I tend to lean into just protein and a vegetable. There are a couple ways to set this up. Typically, foods at restaurants are going to be higher calories than if you cook them yourself because they're going to be cooked in oil. They're going to have like butter and things in them that maybe you didn't see them put in or didn't know they put in. They're just going to use more full fat products, full sugar products. They're not typically going to pick things based on health. They're going to pick things based on flavor and taste because that's what gets people back to the restaurant. So I tend to lean into protein and vegetables. Can you add some carbs in there if you're active and like maybe you typically would have carb sources at your meals? Sure. I would just be a little on the cautious side of the portions. Make sure you keep them a little bit smaller in case they did add oil or butter or sugar or some other component to it that we're unaware of. But protein and vegetables, for the most part, you can be pretty safe. If they butter the vegetables, just ask them not to put some butter on it or put the butter on the side. But that's typically what I do, and I just enjoy the company. Drink calorie-free drink, diet soda, water, whatever. Maybe iced tea with some, fake sugar packets in it for some decent taste. So that's typically what I'll do. Another couple options we have is to also exercise on that day. And if I've done like weight training, for example, I'll go into that meal with a higher caloric usage. My body's demand to use the calories will be higher. So if I do overeat a little bit, my body will actually use some of that excess rather than storing it towards body fat. So that's another option that we have that can help a lot. And then I think I have one other thing. Okay, yeah. The other tip I had was if you're one of my clients and or if you follow the nutrition program that we have on the site, it talks about proper distribution of calories and protein throughout the day. And the structure that I recommend is what's we call thirds. So we sleep 6 to 8 hours a day. We're awake for 16 to 18 hours a day. For most people, I know there are people who shift work, and I work with those clients in different ways. But for most people, they sleep 6 to 8 hours a day. They're awake for 16 to 18 hours. If you divide that into 3 sections, you have the first 5 to 6 hours of being awake, the next 5 to 6 hours of being awake, and then the final 5 to 6 hours of being awake. You want to have a third of your calories of protein in the first 1/3 of the day, first 5 to 6 hours, a third of your calories of protein in the middle third of the day, and then a third of your calories of protein in the final third of the day. If I'm going to be going out to eat for dinner, for example, then I might want to be able to allocate more calories to that third rather than the midday and the beginning of the day. So maybe on the beginning of the day and the midday, I'll eat a little bit lower on the ranges of what is still within range. So that way it allows me a little more caloric allowance in the evening. If I'm going to a work lunch, I just pull a little bit out of the beginning of the day, a little bit out of the end of the day, and that allows me more at work. If a big breakfast, same thing, pull away from the others, add to the breakfast. But that's another option you have, is to still eat at the other portions of the day, but keep the amounts a little bit lower, the carbs and fats lower, and that gives you more carb and fat allowance in the time block or the third of the day when you're going to have that going out to eat dinner or meal. Cool. Next question is we actually get into our training questions here. So next question, if my program calls for 3 sets of 3 to 5 reps, do I find a working weight and do all with that or go up each set? So what we want to do, regardless of whether it's 3 to 5 reps or 8 to 12 or 10 to 14 or whatever it is, you want to take each set as its own effort. Meaning, the set I'm about to do, what is the most weight that I can do with good technique for that rep range? So if it's 3 to 5, I would ask myself, what is the most weight I can do where I know I can do it at least 3 times with good form, but probably not more than 5 times? And then I do that. And then based on how that set went, I would then decide what to do for my next set. So if in the first set I barely got 3, I might want to reduce weight to make sure I can at least get 3 in the next set. But maybe the first set I got all 5 and I was like, oh crap, I kind of probably maybe could have done a 6th. Well, then I'm definitely going to want to add weight to make sure I maximize my 3 to 5 reps in the next set. Maybe in the first set I died somewhere in between 3 to 5 and it was perfect, and I'm confident I can do that again, then I just leave the weight the same. And then after the second set, I think about the third set based on how the second set went with the same idea. Did it feel too heavy? Maybe I want to take some weight off. Did it feel too light? Maybe I want to add weight. If it felt right, maybe I stay there. So we want to think of our working sets as individual efforts. We do not want to think, okay, what can I do in the first set that I might still be able to do in the third set or the fourth set or however many sets we have. We don't want to sandbag the first sets and then just maximize the last set. We want to maximize every single set. So you're allowed to and encouraged to change the weight however is needed along each working set to maximize that working set. So that's the best way to think of it, is they're each individual, their own efforts. You do the best you can for each set regardless of whatever has to happen to the weight in order for you to maximize your technique within the listed reps. Cool. Okay, next question. I'm new to powerlifting and I want to work on my technique to build confidence. How often is too often to squat, bench, and deadlift? It depends on strength levels. The stronger someone is, the more those 3 lifts will beat them up, so they have to do them less often. But if you're new to powerlifting, chances are, well, you could actually be very strong. You're just switching over from a different sport, so I don't want to over assume that we're not on the strong side. But you would want to use a moderate weight load. How you define that is going to be fun. Again, it depends on strength levels. So I would, somewhere between, say, 70 to 85%. And this is just a loose ballpark range. 70 to 85%. I could probably do that for singles, doubles, maybe even triples, and not overly stress my body. So one way to look at it is using an RPE scale. RPE stands for rate of perceived exertion. Typically, when we look at weight training, we think of a scale of 5 to 10. 5 is I'm active, but it's no challenge whatsoever. 6 and 7 is it's starting to get somewhat challenging, maybe a little bit of a muscle burn. 8 is, okay, yeah, this is really hard, but I can do it with good technique. 9 is this was really hard. My technique's starting to kind of waver a little bit. I don't know if these are actually like great reps, but I'm surviving. 10 is the best I could possibly do. Maybe I didn't survive. So that's the range we think of RPE. When you want to squat, bench, and deadlift to just practice technique, typically the RPE would be low. It would be around a 7. To where I'm moving things, it's a little bit of challenge, but there's no fear that I can't do this correctly. My technique is pretty solid. And that's going to give me good quality repetition. There's that terminology in music where like it's not practice makes perfect, it's perfect practice makes perfect. So you have to make sure that what you're doing is perfect. So that way you're ingraining perfect habits. You just don't want to squat, and that's not going to necessarily make you better at squatting. You want to squat, analyzing what you're doing, making sure you're doing it as best as you possibly can, and then that makes you better at squatting. So you could squat every day, bench every day, deadlift every day if you wanted to, as long as the RPE is controlled and the weight load is controlled, so that way you're not damaging your connective tissues and feeling completely destroyed by the end of the week. The downside with that is what time do you have then to actually make tissue stronger, to work on the other aspects of strength-based programming. In strength-based programming, a proper workout, you should have some kind of mobility and movement warm-up. You should have your main lift, and then you have what's called accessory lifts, and there's a bunch of other terms that people will use for them, but they're lifts that make you better at the big lift. So maybe an RDL, Romanian deadlift, helps your conventional deadlift. So maybe after conventional deadlifts, they have you do RDLs as an accessory lift. For squats, maybe you have weaker quadriceps. So after squats, they have you do maybe front squats or even hack squats, like a machine. And that can help build up quadriceps. So there's other exercises we do than squat, bench, or deadlift that help us get better at squat, bench, or deadlift. If we squat, bench, or deadlift too often, we don't have time then for those other movements, and we're not going to get better in those ways. When we think about progressing strength, there's 3 main areas that I kind of teach people is there's technical strength, there's physical strength, and there's mental strength. Technical would be is repeating the lifts with good analytical, attention and trying to improve your technique. So that's what you're asking is how often should I squat, bench, or deadlift to get better at technique? So I can improve my strength output by being technically more proficient. That's one way. A second way is physical tissue strength, like how strong are the tissues that I'm using. And that's typically actually what accessories help with, is to develop the tissues, especially in weak areas or sectional parts of the range of motion that might be related to your weaknesses. And that helps when you put it back into the whole picture, the whole system gets better. You're only as strong as your weakest link kind of thing. So you use accessories to work on your weak links, and that builds up the system as a whole. Then mental strength is, can I be controlled mentally to remember my best technique cues under really heavy stress weights? So those are the 3 areas we want to work on is technical strength, physical strength, and mental strength. If we're just always doing moderate weight loads at 7 RPEs, we're getting some technical strength, hopefully, by being analytical of what we're doing and pay attention to it and trying to improve our cues. But we're not really getting a lot of physical strength development. We're not going to get mental strength development. Mental strength, you could say, is like, well, I'm getting more confident. Sure. But once you start getting up over 80, 85, 90%, that confidence might go right out the window because you've not experienced the heavy weight load often enough. So we want to make sure that we're addressing technical strength, physical strength, and mental strength. And in order to do that, we can't just do squat, bench, deadlift all the time. So typically for clients on a regular basis in most scenarios, I have them squat like basic competition style squats, like once a week, bench once a week, and deadlift once a week. We will increase that. So sometimes they'll squat twice, bench twice, and deadlift still only once. You have to be very careful on deadlift because it loads the spinal erectors, which you also use on squatting. So you have to be careful on the competitive nature between squats and deadlifts. They both compete for the same muscles, just a little bit of different percentages. I would rather have somebody squat more often than I'd have them deadlift more often. And that's in most cases, in most scenarios. There's a little bit of difference sometimes when someone's a sumo deadlifter and they're very upright, but then also maybe they have short femurs and they're upright when they're squatting. So there might be some variance there. But typically, I would have somebody squat twice, bench twice, deadlift once, and that is a frequency enough that I really don't like pushing above that too often. Maybe I would do it for a program or two, but that's typically the frequency that I would think is the most. And then that still gives you time to do the mobility warm-ups. That still gives you time to do the accessories in your training. So that would be my recommendation: is squat twice, bench twice, deadlift once. And then just repeating that week after week after week after week after week, you're going to get enough time under the bar in each lift that you're going to get the confidence that you're looking for. Cool. Next question. I am following the bodybuilding program on Patreon. Woot woot. I was wondering, for leg presses, where should I put my feet? I heard that higher targets, so higher foot placement targets the hamstrings, lower foot placement targets the quadriceps, but I also heard that putting them wherever you feel strongest is best because it maximizes the weight load that you can use, which is important for muscle growth. What do you recommend? Ooh, okay. So in the programs you'll find on Patreon, I will actually list where to put your feet. So the program that they're referencing, it says put feet in strongest position. And they are likely asking just because they want to clarify. So I would, in that case, put them in the strongest position because I'm using the leg press in that moment, in that workout, for a holistic leg approach. If I was using it to try to get more of a quad focus, it is true that I would list feet low and narrow. So leg press, feet low and narrow, because that does emphasize more of the quadriceps. If I wanted more of a hamstring focus, I would say leg press, feet high. Maybe we do high and wide to work on the adductors. Maybe we do high and shoulder width just to work on more hamstring kind of glute connection. But our programming, I would actually list where I want your feet. If you're uncertain as to what to do, I would probably default to always put them in the strongest position. And that's because you're also typically going to be the safest in the strongest position. So for most people, if you're uncertain, put them in the strongest position, move the most weight load you can in the safest way, and that'll stress, quads and hamstrings and glutes and adductors well enough. So that would be the general answer. Next question. I noticed that you update your training programs in Patreon every 4 weeks. With my old coach, our programs used to be 12 weeks, which they said was necessary for learning the movements and forcing progressive overload. Is changing programs every 4 weeks better? I'm assuming that's why you do it. And if it is better, why? Oh, okay. So I'm not a big fan of 12-week programs. I know people do that, and some people have had great success with it. But for the most part, over the years of thousands of people I've gotten to work with, I've found that 12 weeks is not optimal. 8 weeks isn't even optimal. I do like 4. Now, the reason why is the first week you try any new program, new exercises, you're kind of figuring out what you're supposed to be doing, what you're supposed to be feeling. So you're going to get a certain number of reps, a certain amount of weight in that first week. And then by the second week, you have a little more familiarity with the exercise. You have a little more understanding of where should I push, what should I do, how should this feel. And then all of a sudden we can do a little bit more reps, maybe a little bit more weight. We can somehow progress the stimulus. So how hard it felt, we're able to push that a little bit. In week three, you see a little bit of a less improvement in the vastness of how much better you feel with the movement. From week 1 to 2, there's a big change in confidence in how the movement feels. Week 2 to 3, there's probably still some change, but it's a smaller amount of change. So therefore, your ability to increase stimulus, increase reps, weight, gets to be a little bit smaller, a little bit harder to do. Week 3 to 4, there's not as much of a difference now between how comfortable I felt with the movement, how confident I felt in week 3. I'm not going to feel much more confident, much more connected by week 4. So therefore, again, my ability to add weights, add reps gets smaller. Now, if you continue to do that, the difference between week 4 and 5, 5 and 6, 6 and 7, 7 and 8, 8 and 9, 9 and 10. So each week, your ability to feel more connected with the movement gets less and less and less and less different than the week before. That then means it's harder and harder and harder and harder to add more reps, to add more weight. What typically happens is then people sacrifice technique quality, meaning they'll get a little bit loose with their momentum. They'll try to add a little bit of an extra muscle helping out in order to get that 1 extra rep or to get that 5 extra pounds or 2.5 extra pounds. They tend to sacrifice technique in order to force the overload. Well, if you sacrifice technique, you're no longer overloading the muscle we want. You're incorporating other muscles and or shifting the weight to other muscles, and you're increasing your risk of injury. We don't want either one of those things. We don't care about progression if it progresses the wrong muscle, and we don't want to get injured. Every single week past 4 increases the likelihood that we're using the wrong muscles and we're going to get injured. So I like doing 4 and then just clean slate, get new exercises. Maybe we keep an exercise, but now it's at the end of the workout rather than the beginning, or it's at the beginning rather than the end. Or we change a little bit about how we do the movement. Maybe it's at a little bit of a different angle. So maybe I did flat dumbbell presses, now I'm doing 15-degree incline dumbbell presses. A little bit different. So it's very similar movement, but a little bit of a change. So I like having that component change. There be some difference to execution every 4 weeks, because it decreases the likelihood that we're sacrificing technique to make progressions, and it decreases the likelihood that we're going to get injured to try to make progressions. So that's my reasoning. It has worked really well. I have helped people get IFBB Pro cards, Natural Pro cards. I've helped people get elite totals, set national records in powerlifting. I've helped professional athletes, Olympic athletes, you name it. I've gotten to work with people in all kind of high level categories and people who are true beginners. And I find that this approach works very well for everyone. So it is the approach that I default to. I do have certain cases for certain clients that I will modify that. Maybe I'll change even faster than every 4 weeks. Maybe sometimes if somebody's really new to lifting, they're new to a gym and they're really struggling with anxiety and confidence in a gym, I might stay with something a little bit longer just so that way they can feel more and more confident and we're getting them in the gym and that becomes a regular routine for them. So there are cases in which, for each individual person, if it is best for them for me to change that, I will. But in most cases, changing every 4 weeks seems to work really well. Cool. Okay, the last question is a mindset question, and it is, you've worked with clients across the full spectrum, from beginners to advanced. In what you've seen from clients' behaviors and mindsets, what's the difference between the levels? I'm interested in what it takes for someone to move from intermediate to advanced, from good to great. Ooh, fun question. Okay. The answer is not going to be wonderful because people typically want to know a secret. What is the thing that I don't know that's holding me back? That's kind of the thing. So how can we go from intermediate to advanced? How can we go from good to great? The unfortunate answer, I know no one's going to be happy with this because I wasn't happy when I learned it, but the answer is consistency. The people I work with who have achieved the best results, in some cases, their genetic potential was simply better. So where they started was better than most people. So maybe the first deadlift they ever did was 500 pounds. We hate those people. They exist. Oh, they're so frustrating. But there are people who are just naturally strong. I remember one time in the public gym when I owned Brutal Iron Gym public, there was this young guy came in and he was new to this powerlifting group. He has some friends who'd been powerlifting, and he's like, yeah, I squatted, a little bit in high school when I would play football, but I haven't squatted since then. And he's in his early 30s. He got up to 495 pound max, and no belt, no knee sleeves. And it was just him putzing around, following a few cues that the people gave him that night. And oh my gosh, am I happy for him? Absolutely. Do I hate that somebody was able to start at 495, and I remember dying under 195. It sucks. Like, that's not fair, right? But life isn't fair, and I've gotten over that a long time ago. That's just the way it is. So some people are going to be great in certain areas of life, and in other areas of life that we don't see, they probably suck horribly bad. And that makes me feel good. No, I'm joking. But everybody has their own strengths. Everybody has their own weaknesses. So I've learned to celebrate my strengths, and hey, if I got a weakness, which I have plenty, it's up to me to leave it a weakness, or it's up to me to change it. So that's my goal. But there are people who just start further ahead than other people. That's life. That's the way it goes. And it happens. Now, what happens for that person, whether they started ahead of you or not, in order for them to make progress, they have to do the same thing you have to do. Is they have to do the right stuff. They have to eat right, sleep right, train right. They have to do all the things that optimize progression. And they have to do it as consistently as possible. The people who I've gotten to see go from intermediate to advanced, the people who have gotten to see go from good to great, the people who have helped get pro cards, elite totals, world records, all that stuff, the separation is that they miss the fewest amount of things. They will do whatever they got to do to get their calories right that day. They will do whatever they have to do to get their protein right. They take care of their sleep. They communicate with loved ones, friends, family, whatever they got to do to cover their needs. They do not accept missing something. If they miss, they analyze why they missed it, and then they are strict with themselves to not miss it again. They are very good at parenting themselves, which is what I would call it. I made a mistake. Can I recognize what that mistake was? Can I recognize why it happened? Can I put some things into place, actions and plans, on maybe being able to prevent that from happening again? And then execute those plans. And then if it does happen again, I've got to reanalyze my plans. I've got to figure out maybe another way to approach it and then execute that. They're consistently refining how to be as consistent as possible with their nutrition, sleep, training, all the elements, supplementations, everything. So the difference is consistency. They don't accept missing things and then just not adjusting for missing them. There's something in them, whether it's learned or it was innate, is that they do not accept missing their goals. They don't. They are some of the most, just self-aggressive people you've ever met. And I'm a pretty self-aggressive person. So usually my job is to help calm them down. So if they miss a training day, they'll get super flustered, super frustrated. They then ask if they can do like 2 workouts the next day. And I'm like, no. So I wrote 1 workout per day because that's what your body can handle. Please do not do 2 workouts in one day. Good God, you'll die. Will they make it through it? Hell yes, they will. They'll rip a hamstring off to make it through it if they needed to. But that's not long-term beneficial. So that is the difference between good and great, intermediate and advanced, is consistency. And the just overwhelming drive and desire to not miss things, not miss components. And if they miss, they will analyze the hell out of why they missed, and they will make adjustments for it. So that's the biggest difference. It isn't a secret, I'm sorry. There isn't any, special amount of protein or special supplement or anything they're doing different than what you're doing. They just don't miss things as often as beginners and intermediates miss things. So that's it. So like I said, not a fun answer, but it is an answer. So hopefully we can understand that. And then that becomes your focus, is how can I be more consistent? And you might wonder, how consistent is consistent enough? They've never asked me that question. There's your answer. It's as consistent as they can possibly be. And if they miss anything, they don't accept that and they analyze it and figure it out. Now, does that run into, mental issues with perfectionism? You freaking bet it does. And that's also something we talk about quite often, is how do they balance perfectionism with not being pissed off and angry and frustrated and mad all the time. A really good book is by Stephen Guise. The last name is Guise, Stephen Guise. And the book is titled How to Be an Imperfectionist. And one of the things I like about that book is learning that it doesn't matter as much how we execute things. It's just that they get executed. So we want to be able to meet our demands per day. But maybe how we do that has to change and fluctuate, and it'll be varied from time to time. It'll be chaotic from time to time. But the key is that we somehow get it in. So the book, How to Be an Imperfectionist, would be a great book to read if you do struggle with perfectionism, or you have this self-defeating kind of behavior or belief that, if I got too serious about it, I know it would just ruin the quality of my life, so I can't get that serious. Kind of bullshit there a little bit. So read that book, How to Be an Imperfectionist, and then try to be a freaking perfectionist. But keep that book in mind. You're going to make much better progress and be happier in life when you feel like you're progressing towards your goals, rather than not progressing at all and blaming some, belief that, if I got too serious, it wouldn't be good for my quality of life. If you've experienced that in the past, read a book like How to Be an Imperfectionist. Listen to podcasts on perfectionism. Educate yourself on how to approach it better next time. So that way you continue to try to make progress, but you don't have to repeat past mistakes. You would learn and develop new skill sets. So that way you can continue to push for being your best, but learning how to balance that with mental and emotional health. Cool. Okay, so that was everything. I hope that everybody was happy with the answers they got. If you have any other questions, as I said on Patreon, you can post them on the main page. We have that post that says questions. Put your questions here. So put your questions there. You can put them in the community page. You can also send me a private message on Patreon. I'm happy to answer the questions as best as I can, include them in this weekly Q&A. And then you can also you can contact me through our website, c3method.com, and it's C3, the 3 is spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so C-T-H-R-E-E method.com. But if you're on the Patreon service, please contact me on there. It's a little bit easier for me to keep everything on one site, one place, and that is kind of the idea of that service. So if you don't mind, please use that service for the questions. But at the end of the day, I just want you to get your questions answered. So however you're going to do it, reach out, let me know, and I'll get you the answers. Cool. Okay, I think that's everything. And then just a reminder that if you like the Patreon service, if you like these Q&As, make sure you share them with other people. Tell people, if they have questions about nutrition or training, let them know that this service exists. Let them know that they can get answers from me directly. They can get nutrition education. They can get program education. All that stuff is available on Patreon. Just let more people know so we can continue to build the network. And that helps you network and communicate with more people and get to know more people. So it's super fun, all good stuff. So thank you for those who support the Patreon service, and thank you for those who spread the word and help bring more people to it. Okay, as always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.